What's up everyone, this is Robotis. Today I'm bringing you a guide for my all-time favorite champion. In the right hands, she's one of the most powerful mages in the game, and even though she can be confusing to pick up at first, she's really fun, and definitely worth adding to your champion pool. This is my Orianna rune page. It's an old school page, but it fits my playstyle well, so I'm still rocking it. It runs flat AP quints, armor yellows, MR blues, and hybrid pen reds. I run hybrid pen reds over flat magic pens so my auto attacks do more damage to my opponents. This is especially relevant to Orianna because auto attacking is very important to her kit. She does a lot of her damage through the use of her passive, Clockwork Windup, which does additional magic damage on auto attack and can stack up to 2 times on the same target. In comparison to magic pen reds, hybrid pen loses about 3 M pen and gains 8 armor pen. Although the bonus damage from the passive is magic, the armor pen is much better in the early game, and by the time late game comes around, you'll have a void staff anyways. I run armor yellows so I take less damage from minions when I'm trading, and flat magic resistance blues to be as tanky as possible against APs in the laning phase. If you don't have hybrid pen reds, flat magic pen is fine, and if you want to run scaling health yellows or CDR per level blues, that's fine too. You could even run AP per level or flat AP blues if you really wanted to. The quints are pretty optimal though, so I wouldn't change those. I run 12-18-0 Masteries for Orianna, taking Thunderbolt for my keystone. This is a very standard setup, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. The only mastery I really want to say anything about is the Meditation Mastery, which is here, if you don't know. Since the item changes, I think this mastery is worth taking over its competition because of all the flat mana that's in the game now, which makes Meditation much more valuable. For summoner spells, I take Flash because it's Flash, and either Teleport or Barrier. I take Teleport by default, but if I'm in a scary lane like a Zed, LeBlanc, or Fizz for example, I'll grab the Barrier to make sure I stay safe. Some people like Ignite for kill pressure, but Teleport is better in my opinion because you have more map pressure, and at worst, you can use it to avoid missing creeps by teleporting to lane if you need to recall early. Alright, let's talk skill order. On Orianna, your skill maxing order is always going to be Q, then W, then E, taking R whenever possible. You don't max W because it costs too much mana, and you want the cooldown of Q to be low so you can move the ball as much as you can. Depending on your matchup, you'll want to start either Q or E at level 1. If you know you're going to be taking hits from your opponent, start E so you can win trades with the shield. Then take Q at level 2, and then W at level 3. I do this in matchups like LeBlanc, Talon, or Fizz. If my lane opponent is not really able to hurt me much at level 1, I'll take Q first to help last hit or do some early poke. From here, there are choices though. Do you take W at level 2 or E? Since W gives you a bigger damage spike, I take it at level 2 if my lane opponent is playing passive or if their champion is not able to punish me for not having a shield. I'll do this in matchups specifically like Diana, Akali, or Ryze because they have pretty weak early laning phases. Otherwise, if the opponent gets a lot of trading power at level 2, I'll take the shield second to keep me from taking too much damage early on. I do this in matchups like Zed, Azir, or Lulu. Notice that in all cases you have a point in all your spells at level 3. This is important because once you have access to all your basic abilities, you have freedom to manipulate the ball to its fullest, and that's worth much more than an extra point in Q. For items, you're going to have a full build that looks something like this. I'll explain my choices as I go, so let's get right into it. Starting items will, of course, be your Doran's Ring and Delicious Biscuits. Now, in most situations, your first item is going to be Catalyst. The item is so good on Orianna, and it'll let you sustain in lane if you're even or behind. If for whatever reason you're getting a big lead or you're really bullying your laner, you can get a Blasting Wand or Hextech Revolver on your first buy instead of Catalyst, depending on what you can afford. If you can afford the Revolver, grab it. If not, get the Blasting Wand. The end goal is going to be one of the 2 Catalyst items, meaning Rod of Ages or GLP 800. I call it the Freezy Gunblade. Either item is good. Usually I get the one that uses my gold most efficiently when I end up shopping. If you aren't doing so hot, instead leave the Catalyst as is and finish either a Negatron Cloak for an Abyssal Scepter or a Seeker's Armguard for an Hourglass depending on what you're getting wrecked by. Finish the defensive item and then finish building your Catalyst item. At this point it might be better to just grab a Rod of Ages because it's cheaper and you might need to cut some corners. Boots can come in whenever. Usually I get cooldown boots after my first item. If things are still going according to plan, grab a Morellonomicon to get your CDR rolling and bump up your AP for the mid game. Next item is Death Cap, which will boost up your damage a lot. If you're behind, you'll probably have to skip this item because you won't have enough gold. After your hat, grab a Void Staff so you can kill the tanks. If you're behind, Void Staff will be better for your damage output than trying to get a Rabadon, which is why you'll get it instead. Last item is going to be your choice really. Some items I recommend are Abyssal, Ludens, Rylai's, or Hourglass. Fortunately, if you're behind, you don't really have the choice for an item and should probably get a death cap last. Orianna is a unique champion because of her ball. Mastering the flow of the ball is what makes a great Orianna player. It's the easiest way to tell the difference between a new and veteran Orianna. So let's talk about some things that can get your ball movement up to par. When playing Orianna, you have to make sure you know where both you and the ball are at all times. If you lose track of yourself or the ball, you may accidentally whiff a Shockwave or throw your ball somewhere you don't want it to be. It's hard to manage at first, but the more you play her, the easier it'll get. Make sure the ball is never too far from getting back to you. If you leave the ball far away, you become vulnerable, so make sure you can get it back to you quickly either by shielding yourself or forcing it to pop back by walking too far away from it. Here, I move the ball too far forward, so LeBlanc punishes me. In this next one, even though I move my ball out of position initially, I'm able to bring it back to where it needs to be quickly in order to take down Sivir. Finally, keep the ball in a position where it will provide the most presence. Use the ball to zone enemies off of CS or important choke points if you can. Here, I can use the ball to pressure LeBlanc as she tries to last it under turret. Since she's focused on getting the CS, I can move the ball forward to interfere with little risk. The next important point about ball movement is understanding that the ball's range is larger than your Q range. By that, I mean you can be farther from the ball than just one Q's distance. This is important because it allows you to still have pressure in lane or teamfights even though you may be really far away from the action. Leave the ball far away if you're at risk but still want to maintain a presence. A great example of using the ball range to its potential is in this next clip where I'm short on wards in lane, so I don't want to play too far forward. Instead of risking getting ganked, I choose to leave the ball far into the lane instead of me. I stay back until I need to be in Q range to grab the last hits, which lets me be as safe as possible until the wave pushes a little closer to me. A more aggressive way to make use of ball positioning is to use it to zone enemies away from the minion wave during the laning phase. If the enemy laner can't punish you, keep the ball far out in a way that prevents him or her from approaching and deny their last hits. Here's an example of this. Yasuo would love to come get CS, but the ball is very scary, and by keeping it at near max range, I can keep him away and get a CS lead. Next up, I want to talk a little bit about the ball's travel speed. It's very important to remember that when you cast Q, the ball moves slower than if you cast E. If you don't remember this, then you're going to get into awkward situations like this. Instead of casting E on myself to move the ball in the direction of LeBlanc quickly, I cast Q instead. As you can see, the ball takes so much time to move across long distances, which is why you want to use Q for short distances as much as possible. This next clip is how moving the ball should be done. I recognize that my Q is going to take too long to travel the distance it needs to in order to secure the kill, so I cast E on my nearby Darius and then cast Q to close the rest of the distance. Okay, the last point about ball movement sort of ties into what I just talked about. You gotta learn to use your allies to help you move the ball around. Since casting E has both a longer range and a shorter ball travel time, Command Protect makes moving the ball around super convenient. This topic is best shown during teamfights, so I'll talk about it more when I get to that section. Even though Orianna isn't exactly a combo-driven champion, there are still some slick moves you can do with the ball. There are lots of little tricks you can use to quickly proc your Thunderbolt keystone for a nice burst of damage. The first two are proccing the Mastery with auto attacks. You can Q and W and auto quickly for your third hit. The next one is a QE with an auto attack. Notice how when I Q, I make sure the ball ends up behind my opponent so my E does damage when returning to me, otherwise it wouldn't do anything. The third one is probably the coolest looking and involves no auto attack. You do the same thing in the previous example, except instead of using an auto attack for the third hit, you use W. This one is awesome because you can do it from a far range. The other kind of combo you can do with Orianna is a Shockwave combo, although one of them is a Thunderbolt combo, so maybe that's cheating a little. Regardless, here's the standard Shockwave combo, which happens to proc Thunderbolt. You initiate with your ult, press W when the enemies get pulled in, and then Q them for the biggest burst of damage. That Q damage does matter, so try to get that last spell off if you can. Something to be careful of when you start Shockwave comboing people is that if you press W too early after casting Shockwave, it won't do damage because the enemies haven't been pulled into W's radius yet. The other combo you can do with your ult is more of a cool move than a combo. What you do is channel Shockwave while the ball is on you and then flash into enemies, catching them by surprise. What happens is similar to a Shen taunt flash or Gragas body slam flash. You channel a spell and then flash before the spell completes in order to cast the spell in a different spot after flashing. Although the Orianna R flash isn't the most practical move to pull off in game, it's still awesome and definitely worth showing. Orianna's ult is her signature ability. It's such a powerful and game-changing spell that I think it deserves its own section. Let's talk about what Command Shockwave can really do and how to get the most out of the spell consistently. First, I'll go over the uses for your ult. I'll start with the obvious, which is pulling enemies in. The most common use of a Shockwave is to hit the most people you can and group them all together for follow-up damage or CC from your team, assuming you don't kill them all yourself. The instant game-winning Orianna plays come from this style of Shockwave. This is a team fight kind of ult where there are multiple people around to hit. Here's a great example of using CC and damage to wombo an enemy team with Shockwave. Although you might want to save your ult for more members, it's perfectly okay to use it on a single member in the right situations. Don't be afraid to use Shockwave to pick people off or prevent them from getting away like in this clip. Using ult on just Karma lets us get the kill. On the opposite side of things, don't be afraid to use your ult defensively by pulling enemies away from you. Here are two clips where I use Command Shockwave defensively. When you use your ult like this, remember to have your enemies positioned on the proper side of the ball so they get pulled away from you and not towards you. Alright, I think that pretty well covers what a Shockwave can be used for. Now I'll go over some tips to help hit them. I find it's the most difficult to look for and land a multiple man Shockwave, so I'll stick to talking about those. Realistically, the easiest way to land a Shockwave is not by putting the ball on an initiator. While there are lots of good wombos out there with Malphite or Leona or whatever, I find that a lot of the time the initiator will jump out of the ball range during the initiation and I won't be able to get the ult off on whoever is hit. From my experience, the most consistent and effective way to land a multiple man Shockwave is to let the enemies just walk into it. There are three situations I want to go over where they all end in people getting suckered into taking my ult to the face. The first one is where people just don't respect the ball. This happens mostly when I do this thing called fishing. I throw the ball out like a fishing hook and see if anyone takes the bait. People get lured into this false sense of security when I walk far away from the ball, so they tend to be unafraid to stand near it and give me a free ult without having to do anything. This tactic is most effective when sieging turrets because they have limited space to move around and can be focused on other things and might forget the ball is there. Speaking of being focused on other things, the next situation where people tend to get bopped is during a team fight. With everything going on, people are too busy to see where the ball is, so it's really easy to take advantage of that and hit good ults when nobody is looking for them. Situation 3 is more of a difficult means of landing your ult, and it usually involves using an ally as bait. A lot of the time when one of your allies gets CC'd by an enemy member, the rest of the enemy team might initiate on that member thinking they got a pick. This is where you can strike because they're going to group for you. Hit that big ult when the enemies tunnel onto a vulnerable team member like here. Teamfighting well with Orianna is crucial. A lot of the important things that Orianna brings to a teamfight are often overlooked, so I'm going to be going into those things as well as some stuff you want to be conscious of as a teamfight breaks out. Firstly, I want to talk about the most important concept for teamfighting with Orianna, which is maintaining proper space. Every single topic I'm going to go over in this section can tie back to your spacing. If you take anything from this section on teamfighting, it should be this. So with that said, let's get into it. When you fight with Orianna, you have to create a distance between you and your enemies so they have to get through your allies or the ball in order to get to you. When you have good spacing, the enemies have no way to get onto you because your ball and your allies stop them from pushing through. Even if they do break through your allies, Orianna is one of the best kiting mages in the game and a good player will pull the ball back and kite really hard. Here's a short 2v2 where I create space as soon as the fighting breaks out. I immediately position myself at a medium ball range and start kiting. When Nocturne comes in, the enemies have no way to get to me and are forced to hit him. At this point they're screwed because I can shield them and still output my own damage from a safe distance. Normally in teamfights that's the sweet spot, medium ball range. That's when the ball indicator is yellow. There are exceptions though, such as when you're really low and don't want to risk being even that close. Luckily, Orianna can still participate in teamfights from very far away at a far ball distance. Although you don't output nearly as much damage, the utility you bring is still really impactful, so don't be afraid to stick around for a fight because your shields and speed buffs might be enough to turn a fight around or keep the momentum of a fight going. Here's another clip of me getting chunked out early and still sticking around in order to provide shields and speed buffs for my team members. The next topic of teamfighting is the management of cooldowns. Ideally you want to be casting all your basic abilities as they come off cooldown. This is for many reasons. The first is so you can make the most of your Rod of Ages regen as you fight. The second is so you can always have the ball in the best position for any given moment. The more the ball moves around, the more control you have in a team fight. Even when you're running away, keep using your skills. Sometimes when you kite hard enough, you can actually turn and get kills. Another reason to use your skills off cooldown is to shield your allies as much as possible. Every time you cast that shield, it's more HP that your team has in a team fight to work with. Whenever it's up, cast Command Protect on whoever is in the mix taking damage and help keep them alive. Even though I'm talking so much about her utility, don't forget that Orianna's damage is insane in extended fights. The more you use your skills, the more damage you do, so keep using your skills and keep your damage output as high as you can. Let's break down a team fight now. I'm going to go slow and point out a lot of things that I do which help secure a win in this fight. A lot of things I'm going to say should sound familiar because they're concepts I've already talked about in isolation. The first thing is how I keep using my spells to deal damage and kite even though I'm running. After I get hit by the soul ult, I have to flash out of Udyr's range, but by doing so I create my space. Next I hit a 3-man shockwave on the enemies when they run into the ball while chasing Leona and Ezreal. I get chunked out by Alawi, so I stand farther away but still in range to shield and speed up my allies. I shield the Leona who's taking damage and help keep her alive, as well as to use her to move the ball into a forward position. I push the ball forward to deal damage and secure a kill for my team. Remember, the ball doesn't need to stay on the ally when you cast E, the shield will stay on them. Next, I shield Fizz when he engages so he'll bring the ball into the action. I should have shielded Leona though because she was at a lower HP. We kill the final member and win the fight. I used my knowledge of ball movement, shockwaves, and good spacing to play that fight almost flawlessly, and because of it, I was a large contributor to the victory. This final section is going to be a quick overview of Orianna's known bugs, so if one of them happens to you in game, you won't be taken by surprise. The first one is the double ball range indicator bug, where you have a phantom static indicator above Orianna alongside the working one. I don't have any footage of it because in general I record off the spectator, but I found some images so you can see what I mean. I don't currently know how to reproduce the bug, but from my experience it's not too uncommon to see in game. The second bug is an invisible ball bug, which can be reproduced when your ally recalls or dies while your ball is in motion towards them via Command Protect. What happens is the ball turns invisible when it's on you until you cast a spell, which returns it to normal. The final bug is an actually big gameplay hindering bug and is a really big pain in the butt to deal with. It happens when you channel Shockwave on an ally who uses a movement displacing spell. Even though the ball is on them, the Shockwave lags behind and doesn't cast where it's supposed to. This has been a bug for many years now, and the only way to get around it is to channel Shockwave later than you want to. Normally, you'd want the ult to hit as soon as your ally completes their dash or jump, but because of this bug, you have to wait until their movement is complete before you channel ult, like I do here with Lee Sin. And with that, that's going to be everything I have to say for this guide. If you have any questions, feel free to comment, and I'll do my best to respond to them. Thanks for watching.